Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So many wild things to talk about today on the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We're very glad you're here. We'll be talking about the illegal who was caught while working as a police officer, nonetheless, but still trying to illegally obtain a firearm. We'll definitely get to that. We also have some good Trump, bad Trump today. His running out of patience with Vladimir Putin is certainly good, but his treatment of the president of Taiwan, a little bit of a head scratcher. I think I know why it's happening, but it's still not, I don't think, the right move. Before we get going here, Jim, we talked at the end of last week, of course, about all the phenomenal figures who were household names in the 80s, Hulk Hogan, Ozzy Osbourne, Malcolm Jamal Warner. And at the time, I knew this was coming, but it still stings. Last night, we found out that Ryne Sandberg, the great second baseman for the Cubs, my favorite baseball player, one of the reasons I cheered for the Cubs, that and WGN and Harry Carey getting increasingly uninhibited as the game went on, and just summer afternoons, Cubs home games, of course, during the day at that time, and just absolutely delightful to watch that all summer long. Again, another reminder that the 80s was a long time ago, even though Sandberg just 65 years old. That seems awfully young to us now. Had battled prostate cancer, seemed to be in the clear, and then just a few months later, it was not only back, but metastatic prostate cancer. And he, again, died yesterday at the age of 65. Metastatic prostate cancer, of course, the same thing former President Joe Biden dealing with at a much older age. So, Jim, the days keep going, and sometimes it's hard.
It does. And you mentioned, how you fell in love with the Cubs. I just know that by saying, "Hey, everybody," I just know that would bring a smile to your face, because when you hear that, you think of Harry Carey, you think of his crazy eyeglasses, and just the joy of that. I think it was The Athletic had a headline that put it well, that says, look, you think Chicago sports, today people think of Michael Jordan, Mike Ditka, sweetness, Walter Payton. Clearly the 85 Bears were this, epic conquering heroes of the NFL of that era. But before then, Chicago sports was dominated by the Cubs and Ryne Sandberg. And obviously not the Cubs with a tradition of winning. So when you can really be known for excellence on a team that is, I think it was George Will who said any team can have a bad century or so. The Jets are like 15 years into that. Yes, it is kind of heartbreaking to lose the heroes of our youth, and I hope they feel very appreciated in the time that they were here.
10 All-Star appearances, 9 Gold Gloves, 7 Silver Sluggers, and at one point the all-time leader in home runs for second baseman. And he just went long stretches without ever committing an error. And at second base, in the middle of the double play, at a time when people could raise their feet up and spike you in the knees while they were sliding into second trying to break up the double play, that's saying quite a lot. But also just a fantastic guy with the fans, absolutely beloved figure, and again, just some more tough news. But let's get on to our good news. And President Trump might be overseas, might be playing a decent amount of golf, but he's definitely making headlines. Yesterday, we talked about the deal with the EU and kind of this parade of people that are coming up to Turnberry, Scotland to meet with him, from the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Yesterday, I think it was during the visit with Starmer, in fact, the president was asked about Vladimir Putin and Russia and Ukraine, and Trump has made it very clear over the past several weeks that he's running out of patience with Putin, and he got a little more specific with what he means by that.
I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting. There's no reason in waiting. It's 50 days. I want to be generous, but we just don't see any progress being made.
And so, Jim, I think we've talked about this before, but basically Trump is a deal maker. Trump's a negotiator. And what he expects is when people say things that they'll pretty much follow through on them, which Vladimir Putin has not done at all. He's feigned interest in coming to a resolution here. But every time he does, the hostilities ramp up, if anything. They at least certainly stay at the same intensity. And Trump is tired of playing this game. Now, what he has in mind in terms of the consequences, obviously, if nothing happens in the next week to week and a half, 2 weeks here, that'll be the big tell.
Greg, listeners know I've been critical of the president quite a bit, and probably in the first couple months of the administration, no policy decision was driving me battier than this treatment of Vladimir Putin as a serious partner for peace, for taking a for being strung along endlessly in these meetings, for sending Witkoff. It was just, all terrible. The dressing down of Zelensky in the Oval Office. And a lot of that has changed. There were interesting reports that Trump had asked his advisors, has Putin changed since the last time I spoke to him in the first term? And there are people who are Russia experts who say, a lot of time in isolation during COVID may well have changed the way Putin sees the world and the way he acts and makes decisions. There are a whole bunch of people who figured Putin was never going to invade because it was seen as irrational. It was seen as too big a risk for too little reward. Putin chose to invade back in 2022. Trump reportedly was shocked by Russian forces attacking civilians, bombing apartment buildings, killing children, bombing a maternity hospital, things like that. And so, some of us who've been covering the war since the beginning might say, yes, this has been going on since February 2022. This is not something new, Mr. President. But the president's patience is not eternal. And the president did not let himself to endlessly be strung along. When Trump announced 50 days, I was glad to see them putting any limit on it. But there were a lot of people who said, well, if you've seen no progress up until now, why are you giving Putin another 50 days before you impose some sort of consequences? The Russians will simply interpret that as, okay, we have 50 days to do whatever we want, and then we have to act like we're interested in a peace deal again. And if the war does get if the U.S. somehow manages to shove both sides towards a ceasefire, well, then Russia wants to gain as much territory as possible before then. So a 10 to 12 day deadline is better. I think you could probably ask the question of if you've seen no progress, why do you need another 10 to 12 days? But you know what? I will not look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm just very pleased to see this president. You mentioned what options there are. To the surprise of some people, I am not a fan of the Lindsey Graham bill that's currently in the Senate. Now, it allows the president to impose up to 500% tariffs on any country that is purchasing Russian oil, or Russian energy supplies in any way, shape, or form. Now, one complication among them is that one of the countries that is buying Russian energy is the United States of America. We purchased plutonium from them for our nuclear plants. These were deals that were negotiated before the invasion, and they are basically legally binding that even if we were to turn away, that they've already been paid for, and the U.S. could turn away the plutonium, but they're still getting their money one way or the other. But nonetheless, it is still a little bit of an embarrassment that we, staunchly opposing Russia, are actually still buying products from them. A lot of European countries are buying Russian energy products. Japan is purchasing Russian energy products. Brazil, South Korea. So the question is, do we want to impose up to 500% tariffs on a whole bunch of our trading partners over this? Now, I can understand the argument maybe having this as a threat would discourage these other countries from purchasing Russian energy projects. I guess I'm willing to hear the arguments on that, but this seems like Lindsey Graham wanted to take one of Trump's favorite things, which is tariffs, and tie that to a way of punishing not just Russia, but anybody who's supporting their war machine by purchasing their energy products. Look, we have sanctioned them up the wazoo. We have done a lot of stuff. Look, has the Russian economy completely collapsed since the start of the war? No. But you hear a lot of creaks. There are a lot of people who study it who say interest rates are unbelievably high over there, cash reserves are low, spare parts are low. They're having, basically the strain on the system is quite considerable. So I'm curious to see what the administration wants to do in terms of punishing Russia. But look, this is a sea change in the president's attitude from a couple months ago, and I'm just thrilled for it. Attaboy, Mr. President, keep going. And I think this greatly enhances the chances of not just an end to the war, not just peace, but a just peace, or a end to the war that will preserve as much territorial integrity on the part of the Ukrainians as possible and leave the Russian war machine as defanged as possible.
Yes, and we'll see what other tools he has in his arsenal. There's obviously, I think, some sanctions that we haven't already applied. Don't know what else he could potentially do diplomatically. It just makes me cringe every time when I find out that we're reliably dependent on somebody like Russia or China for something we have to have, like plutonium in this case, or China makes a ton of our medicines, or
rare earth metals, the space program,
our own ammunition. Yeah, it's not a good situation when you're very much dependent on your adversaries for those things. So when it comes to those things, I'd love to get that either produced domestically or by people who actually like us. All right, let's talk about OneSkin. Again, brand new sponsor here on the 3 Martini Lunch. Did you know your body starts accumulating senescent cells as early as your 20s. They're also called zombie cells, but senescent sounds so much nicer. So these cells stop producing collagen and hyaluronic acid like they used to, and they start secreting an inflammatory substance that makes neighboring cells dysfunctional too. There's an answer for these zombie cells, and it comes from our new friends at OneSkin.
You know, Greg, I read about U.S. dependency on Russia and China for important goods, and I get worry lines. I get bags under my eyes. I get tired. OneSkin was founded in 2016 by an all-woman team of scientists with PhDs in skin regeneration, stem cell biology, immunology, and bioinformatics. They developed the OS01 peptide, the first ingredient to reverse skin's biological age by reducing the accumulation of senescent cells, which are a key driver of skin aging. OS01 works at the cellular level to improve key aging biomarkers. OneSkin believes the purpose of skincare is not just to improve how you look, but to optimize your skin's biology at the cellular level so it's more resilient to the aging process.
Yeah, find out for yourself about OneSkin. Mrs. Columbus has started using it. She loves the fact that it's light. It's not a heavy cream. It absorbs into the skin real quickly. OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. So get started today with 15% off using code 3ML at oneskin.co. That's 15% off at oneskin.co with the code 3ML. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, so please support your favorite podcast and tell them that we sent you. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And of course, the tensions along the Taiwan Straits have been an issue that simmer from time to time. There always seems to be something else that's bigger than that on the front page of the paper. But this is certainly one of the objectives of the Communist Chinese Party is to bring back Taiwan fully under Communist Chinese control. The U.S., of course, has defended Taiwan for the most part, to promise to defend Taiwan, although it was very confusing during the Biden administration because Biden would say, absolutely, we're going to defend them. And then his team would be, oh, no. Nothing's changed.
What the president meant to say is that we have a one China policy and we just won't say which one is the one China we recognize, which always struck me as a crazy policy. But that's
absolutely. That policy started during the Carter administration. It made no sense in the 1970s, and it still makes no sense.
You could see the peanut farmer's fingerprints all over it. Yes.
So anyway, the president of Taiwan right now is a guy that we wanted to win the last election. His name is Lai Ching-te, and he was scheduling a trip to Latin America, but wanted to stop in New York City along the way. But the U.S. government has denied that stop in New York City, so the whole trip has had to have been canceled now. And Jim, the Occam's razor argument here is that Trump knows that he's got this August 1st deadline with the Chinese, still don't have the final details worked out on this reworked trade agreement, so doesn't want to irk Beijing here in these final days, and that's probably why that happened. But even if that is the case, this is a pretty small ask, at least in my mind, allowing President Lai to come to the United States just for a brief time on his way on his trip.
It stinks. And, the president had been on this hot streak, from my perspective, taking out the Iranian nuclear program. By the way, Ignatius's column in the Post says it's been set back at least a year, and with considerable likelihood of further delays and problems and serious challenges they would have to developing doing anything further in secret. Strengthening NATO, getting every NATO partner except Spain to agree to spend 5% of GDP on defense. And then, sending aid to NATO that NATO will turn around and then give to Ukraine. That's great. Like, what I talked earlier in the first martini, Trump had been on such a good run. And now you knew it was going to have to come to an end over something. I'm not shocked. Trump in the past has, when asked about defending Taiwan, immediately pivoted to complaining about them on trade issues, which does not indicate a burgeoning desire to defend Taiwan from a bullying neighbor. But also, I want to point out that, we're the United States of America. We decide who gets to visit us, not China. In the Financial Times coverage of this story, it says, China objects to Taiwanese leaders visiting the U.S., which does not have official diplomatic relations with Taipei. Now, that's a little bit of a wink and a nod, because we don't have an embassy over in Taipei. We have the American Institute in Taipei, and we have a special representative who's totally not a diplomat, including my friend and colleague, Therese Shaheen, served in this capacity. They're not an ambassador. Wink, wink. Never mind that when you come back to the United States, you could be called an ambassador. Again, this is the ridiculousness of having what functions as full diplomatic relations with a country, but not saying to the rest of the world, it's not diplomatic relations. We don't recognize them. You put the Taiwanese government in a lineup with other governments. We cannot pick them out. We don't recognize them. That's the official ruling there. But it says that, basically to China, we shouldn't be allowed to host them. Well, go pound sand. That's not your call. We decide who we decide we want to host them. We decide who goes through our airports. You don't get a veto over this. Now, if it later comes out that the Trump administration said, don't do this now. We got to get through this trade negotiation. Oh, by the way, we're supposed to have tariffs go in effect on Taipei, too, on Taiwan. But if they said, not now, let's get through this particular tense group of negotiations, and then we'll be fine. Fine, I could live with that. That's a different restriction. But basically, saying to, the leader of Taiwan, no, you cannot visit the United States, and therefore you're not allowed to visit Paraguay, Guatemala, and Belize. First of all, Greg, who wouldn't want to get away to Paraguay, Guatemala, and Belize during summer? Right? Like, that's, I know it's a working trip. It's not a vacation. But no, it just looks like a really unnecessary concession to China. It really looks like giving them a forum. And here's the thing: by doing this, what lesson do you think the Chinese take from this? Do you think that they're going to be more reasonable, more conciliatory, more likely, or do you think they're going to say, well, now that the U.S. has allowed us to veto this, here are these other things the U.S. does that we don't want them to do? So I think the way you got to deal with these bullies like this is to say, no, we're a sovereign country. We make our own decisions. We will decide who visits our country and who doesn't. And if you guys don't like it, you can go pound sand. So I'm really bothered by this. We'll see how this shakes out, but it just feels like an utterly unnecessary concession to a hostile regime that Trump always seems to be convinced. He keeps telling us how well he gets along with Xi Jinping, and I don't think he understands how that's not particularly reassuring and not what we want to hear.
All right, Jim, perhaps if there had been some confusion about the timing of this, the Trump administration and the Taiwanese could have solved this with a simple phone call. An open phone would have been perfect for this, because in today's fast-moving world, your team needs to stay connected to your customers without missed messages, communication silos, or slow phone systems. A flexible and efficient business phone system isn't just nice to have, it's essential to succeed. And that's why you need Open Phone.
With AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, you'll be able to automate your follow-ups, ensuring that you never miss a customer interaction again. So whether you're a one-person operation who's drowning in calls and texts, or you have a large team that needs better collaboration tools, Open Phone is a no-brainer. See why more than 50,000 businesses trust Open Phone to manage their businesses' calls and texts.
Open Phone is offering our listeners 30% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/3ML. That's OPENPHONE.com/3ML. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. All right, Jim, on to the crazy martini today. And we had a lot of options for the crazy today, but this one's especially weird. It takes us to the great state of Maine, which is a place you do want to vacation this time of year, by the way. The weather's fantastic up there. But illegal immigration is not usually the issue you think of in connection with Maine, but they've got a strange case up there of an illegal immigrant who got caught trying to buy a gun. He was denied, but he was also working as a police officer in a town up there in Maine. And then the questions came pouring in. Well, why did you hire an illegal? And it turns out that he'd overstayed his visa, but was still hired by the force. And the police department here says, no. We checked with the Department of Homeland Security. They said he was good here till 2030, which is now raising questions about the accuracy of E-Verify, which needs to be cleared up, because E-Verify is going to be a huge part of ever getting illegal immigration under control if employers are inclined or required to use it.
Yeah, Greg, my first thought was the next time a police officer asks me for any proof of citizenship, I may well respond, you first. So this is the news is broken by Fox News' Bill Belugan. ICE put out a press release on this. This is up at the Old Orchard Beach Police Department in Maine. A gentleman by the name of John Luke Evans, who is a citizen of Jamaica, entered the United States September 4th, 2023. You'll recall that's nearly 2 years ago. He was scheduled to depart on a flight October 1st, so a little bit more than a week, never got on the flight. At that point, he had overstayed his legal visa and was thus an illegal immigrant. At some point, he then, applied for a job with this police department and got hired. And by the way, it's worth noting, if you are in the country illegally, no, you are not allowed to carry a firearm. You are not allowed to own a firearm. You are not allowed to use a firearm, right? So, ICE arrests the guy, issues this blistering statement ripping into the police department saying, it would be comical if it wasn't so tragic. They've hired an illegal alien and unlawfully issued him a firearm while on duty, when he's supposed to be enforcing immigration laws, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the police department, as you noted, says, no, we checked with E-Verify, everything checks out. Now, as I was writing today's Morning Jolt about this, about 1 million times National Review has said we need universal E-Verify. It's almost a common rallying cry for all kinds of folks on the right. And I'm not going to disagree with that. The problem is E-Verify is not a perfect system. And it's not just the routine fat finger punching in the wrong data or something like that. What E-Verify can do is you take the person's name, date of birth, social security check, and it runs it against government databases to say, aha, do these exist in existing U.S. databases? According to E-Verify, 98% of the time, everything checks out just fine. That, by the way, either that's great or that's a sign that it can't detect fraud. That's the other thing. Yeah. It can't check that what the name, date of birth, and social security number provided by the job applicant actually belongs to the applicant. There was this big raid out in Nebraska, detained 76 workers who were in the country illegally, and the employer's like, well, look, I checked with E-Verify. And the thing is that if you've got a stolen credit card, if you've got a stolen social security number, identity theft, the system can't detect that. So it's one thing, if it's a farmer, a meat packer gets fooled by, stolen social security numbers and a fake driver's license, that's bad. But on the other hand, we don't expect those businesses to be experts in verifying false documents. When you're a police department, I think we can have our standards a little bit higher. Because what do cops do? They pull somebody over for speeding, license and registration. They're checking out documents. I imagine somewhere up in Maine, they've got some bar. Maybe they're checking underage drinkers. You got to look at a driver's license, see if it's the real thing or whether it's a fake. Real embarrassment to this police department. Again, they're going to say, hey, we check. By the way, under federal law, it is illegal to knowingly hire an illegal immigrant to do your work, to do a job. If you're unknowingly, then you're off the hook. So, the police department's going to say, hey, we thought he was legal the whole time. And my suspicion is it'll be a case of this person had committed identity fraud. So you used fraudulent documents to get through the E-Verify system, and that's how it's all turned out hunky-dory. By the way, also in today's Jolt, I lay this out. DACA recipients. There are probably, something in the neighborhood of a little more than 500,000 individuals currently have DACA status. This is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. You come here as a little kid or as a baby, your parents entered the country illegally. You were not born in the United States, but you basically have no ties to the country of your parents' citizenship, and technically your citizenship. A whole bunch of states have now made it legal for people who have DACA protection to become police officers. Now, the weird thing is that DACA literally means just deferred action. You are not a citizen. And you are in this weird limbo in which you are not in the country illegally, but the federal government also says you are not in the country legally, meaning you're not on a path to citizenship or anything like that, which under federal law, you cannot own a firearm. Now, there are some people who have become, and I did links to various stories in this, there are people who become cops who do not carry a firearm under the DACA program. Very often they're kind of working as translators for other police officers and stuff. And that's fine. Or bailiffs in a courtroom, or situations in which they are not required to have a firearm. Nonetheless, I think it's unusual. I think you can deeply sympathize with the stories of the individuals. They may well be good people who would make good cops. It is a little strange, by the way. There's one article about one out in California who's working for the UC Davis Police Department. Greg, the gentleman's name is Ernesto. I'm going to assume it's pronounced Moron. It is spelled Moron. I do not want to make fun of this gentleman. We all have difficult, you and I know a thing about having surnames that are hard to spell. His is easy to spell. I imagine the pronunciation is not helpful. And so, but yes, there is Officer Moron, or perhaps Moron. But anyway, I was ready to be, just spitting hot fire about this, saying that there's so little care about enforcement of immigration laws that this small town police department just decided to hire an illegal immigrant. If they checked on E-Verify, they have at least some excuse. But that does point to the E-Verify system not being reliable, and thus we need a better way to determine when someone shows up for a job, are they eligible to do the work? Are they eligible to be in the country or not? And really, a fascinating and kind of frustrating story up out of Maine today, Greg.
Yeah, no question about it. And it's just frustrating that the tools that you think are in place are not necessarily up to the job in every case. So you need people who can spot fake IDs, even if they cost these people a fortune. That's John McClane. Or, as Deputy Chief Dwayne Robinson once pointed out, you could be a bartender.
Thank you for finding the references that I could not find today, Greg. Also, ceramics, ceramic guns, all ceramic guns, just like your mom's kitchenware. They're all ceramic.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Tuesday. Join us again Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.